Hello and welcome people to a tutorial on how to render retro console footage into 60 frames a second videos. And by which I mean actual 60 frames a second videos where every single frame displays a different moment in time. This of course will only work in games that actually have 60 frames in them. So let's begin with my example. Let's let's base everything off of the video just so I can show off everything that needs to be changed. First and foremost, 1280 on 720 because otherwise YouTube will not accept the video being in 60 frames. Square aspect ratio because that's how it is. And now the frame rate. The frame rate you should choose between 5994 or 60. It all depends on the piece of footage itself. It just kind of varies on the game and even on the moment itself because the frame rates tend to be kind of unstable. So let's just roll with this one for now. And now for everything else, the interlacing method none and apply. Now I should mention this is only valid for games that actually run in interlaced, because for games that run in progressive scan this simply is not needed. They will just display regular frames and there is nothing you have to mess around with there. Now, how do I know the image is actually 60 frames? Well, first of all, you need to make sure that it is on either Smart Resample, which is the default setting, but just putting that out there, or Force Resample, because Disable Resample will not allow you to have 60 frames from a video like this. Now, let's get to a place where there is movement, and as you see, every single frame has our main character moving. Now there are some things that you may have noticed, as in the image jumps slightly. This is why I applied this grid here, so you can see, for example, say pay attention here. The bars just kind of jump up and down. This isn't a glitch with the program or the video itself, it's just the nature of the interlaced format. As in, it doesn't show full frames in 60 frames format. It just shows half of the image every other frame, and each half of the image is displayed in an alternating order, sort of weaving in between one another. This on a CRT TV, it creates an illusion of the full image. On a HD TV, it creates a goddamn mess. Now, this isn't quite as noticeable when you actually play the footage regularly. Let me get to some point with a little bit more movement. Yeah, and I also should mention that some degree of motion blur, like for example here, you can try to adjust the video to say 60 frames, but as far as I can tell, or even 120, let's see. Nope. This is the no, not 49, you stupid. 94. Yeah, there isn't much you can do. It just varies. It just changes, and also the game itself applies motion blur to the picture in order to actually kind of hide the shaking, which doesn't work all that well. But There is a way you can actually get rid of all of the shaking, which is to duplicate a track. Now put this track underneath, just like I did there. Zoom in at the very start, move it a frame, and move it one frame. Now let's change this setting to 50%, which is the visibility. And now to see on this menu, it's gonna be easy to see. I will get rid of it for a second. It just kind of jumps up and down. And now let's apply this back. And now nothing moves. However, this isn't all that great either, because this setting actually makes the earlier exists. It just makes the motion blur even more pronounced. Let's see. The image still runs at 60 frames, and it's not shaking at any moment in time, but there is more motion blur than there was before. This isn't entirely terrible, simply because this format by itself relies on imperfections of the TVs it was displayed on, which just kind of always had a little bit like the image the field wouldn't disappear immediately when the next one would appear. So it created that illusion, which is something that I am emulating here right now. And the image is still at 60. However, there is one more method that can be done with this, actually with a different program, which is you didn't see that, which is this one, Handbrake. First, you set up a source, and then you can just leave everything here as it is. It will crop the image accordingly. It does a very good job at that, so I would just leave it as it is. And now the interlace. There is a Bob the interlace method, which essentially will take every field, look at the field before that and after that, and recreate the entire image. Recreate entire frames, which is pretty damn neat. And then take the frame rate and choose constant frame rate. It can be peak, it can be constant. I prefer constant. It will not create any motion blur if there wasn't already unless there is already motion blur on the video, in which case there is no way to get rid of that. Set that to medium. Do not go to very slow or any higher than that, simply because it has tendency to drop frames at that point. Quality, I choose 18 just because I didn't actually see any difference between those. And 4.1, just kind of a routine I do. Now choose the place where you want it to be. I, however, already have that video converted, and I will put it here once I find it. Now we have the same video. And now you see, let me just take it onto the menu. As you see, nothing is moving around, not even the lines that were moving around before. And when we take it to the gameplay, everything is still moving at 60 frames. There is a certain degree of motion blur, but you cannot get rid of that. The bars are not moving, as you see. However, there is still a certain degree of interlacing artifacts. That just kind of that's just is a trade-off you have to deal with. I will get a frame where you can actually get a decent view at what I am talking about. Okay, I think here. Like you can see particularly on here, on the hangar, you can see that the image sometimes shakes slightly, and also particularly the diagonal lines, everything that isn't exactly horizontal or horizontal or vertical, is going to have just this slight shimmer to it. Let me just... But overall, I would say this is as good as it gets. You cannot get rid of all of the shimmering. This is just something inherent to both interlacing and low resolution graphics. It's just something you have to deal with. But yeah, as you see, there is much less motion blur than there was, for example, here when applying the filter. Like you see here, the entire image is smooshed. Move, please move. Yeah, like here, you see the entire thing is covered in motion blur. There is one more method that is actually better than both of them combined, because it gets rid of any... it's essentially the same as Handbrake, except even better. It gets rid of more artifacts than Handbrake does. However, it's also the most inconvenient one to the most inconvenient one to use. I'll show this as an example. Actually, let me change something. Disable resample, that is. Because I think one of them I recorded in 120 frames. Just as sort of an experiment. But as you see, the hanger is not shimmering anymore. But overall, okay. I forgot to even mention how to apply it. What kind of a tutorial is this? You do this essentially by first going into your graphics card settings and go into the quality tab. I mean, if you have a different graphics card, I can't help you there. You didn't see that. For the most part, most of these settings are for the image that are there for the image enhancement. Turn them off. They mess the image so much, especially at such low resolutions, and when with the interlacing applied to it. Edge enhancement I leave at just a smudge, just one, because it does actually improve the image, and enable upscaled artifacts reduction. That also actually improves the image, but everything else I just decide to turn off. As far as the deinterlacing itself goes, direction adaptive is good for everything that comes from PS2 and onwards, by which I mean just the PS2. And when you're doing something from the PS1 era or before, use adaptive, because the direction adaptive will try way too hard to interpret a full image based on two fields, which there is none. Actually, that's another thing I want to cover. Let me see. Yes. Here I have a piece of footage from a PS1 game that actually runs at 60 frames, at the very least during the overworld sections. As you see here, every single frame you move to a different spot. However, the problem is the image, well, this is slightly different from the PS2 interlacing, as in these sorts of games, every single field contains the entire image. It does not rely on illusion basically fooling your eyes into seeing an image that is twice as tall as the actual resolution of the picture simply because of motion. It does actually, it just has low resolution, and it shows the entire picture in every single field, which in this actual case, every single frame of the image. Now, there is, however, a problem with this format in that no current capture card actually can interpret this signal correctly. As you see, even on the very slow movement, or let's say, oh yeah, here. Now go ahead and prove me wrong. The bottom line is, for the most part, the idea is that those old consoles will feed only the top field, and the rest is going to just get the CRT TV just rolls with it. However, the modern capture devices will try to fit the next field, which is still supposed to be the top one, to the bottom one, which in turn causes shaking on the image. Let me see here. Yeah, you see? And while it does not look, it doesn't always look terrible on the when you play it. When it does, it really does. You can apply the exact same method as before with the filter. That's half transparent and one frame late. However, in this case, Handbrake does an even more fantastic job with the interlacing it, simply because it just doesn't need to think at all. It does not need to think at all because every single field is the entire image, so it doesn't need to recreate anything. The field before that and after, two fields in a row each create one entire image, so all it does is it puts them in their respective order, so to say, in their respective place. So if you use Handbrake, the image doesn't shake. This works the same for the footage from Sega Saturn, or it should in theory work for the footage from anything before that. Now, after you're done adjusting everything, you just mark the footage that you want to. Oh, well, that's weird. Yeah, I just cut off the very beginning. You just mark the footage, render it, make your settings. I will show you these ones that I made for not cancel. I said I will show you. With audio, I don't do anything. I am just way too, I just cannot notice it. CBR, go for that if you are willing to deal, if you're going with high amount of bitrate. If you're gonna go for something lower, go for VBR, because then it just will adjust the amount of bits to how much information there is on the image. I just go for CBR because VBR just takes too long to render. The frame rate, just make it the same as your video to avoid everything. Video smoothness, I don't know why they always set it to 90 if it just can always be 100. Why would you ever not want your video to be as sharp as possible? But yeah, that's what my settings are. Render loop region only. Yeah, don't adjust any sort of settings, and just render, and it will come out as it does on the project. So I hope this was helpful to anyone, and thank you for watching.